Seized power because he had the best army. Problems. He allowed to travel with soldiers. Slowed the army down. Admitted barbarians to army. Bad move.
That was a big one. He admitted the barbarians to the army. Okay, which we're going to see in the end is going to be costly. Okay, so here are a few problems of Severus. Okay. He allowed families to travel with soldiers. That's interesting, eh? Definitely would slow the army down. Go ahead.
Carcalla.
Carcalla.
211 to 217. Son of Severus, brutal, unpleasant man, murdered his brother to gain the throne, raised wages for the army, bribed barbarians to stay away from Rome. Taxes increased dramatically and currency lost its value. Inflation, Roman Empire in debt.
Good. Anarchy in Rome.
100 claimants to the throne. 26 took the title for an average of 2 years, all of them a violent end. Plagues, constant wars, taxes skyrocketed, currency has no use, back to border economy because of inflation.
Good. So basically, but between these years, roughly 20 years, it's just anarchy in Rome. If you take a look at the number, uh, how many people claimed um, uh, their supremacy to the throne. 26 took the title for an average of 2 years. So I mean, just chaos between 265 and 284 in the Roman Empire. And then we get to a very important man. So I want to put a big star beside this one, Diocletian. Okay, who we learned a little bit about yesterday and his role with the Christians. 285 to 305. Dina, nice and loud, please. Diocletian.
Born in Yugoslavia, poor family in Illyria, restored order, governed without advice from Senate, autocrat, recruiting of Germanic immigrants into army. In 29-3 split the empire east Diocletian, Eastern Empire, Maximus, Western Empire. Diocletian's reforms saw greater control for emperor, took Dominus, Lord and God, semi-divine and high priest. Final attempt to eradicate Christian faith. Churches destroyed and scriptures burned. Only emperor to retire.
Yes, only emperor to retire. So again, the big one here, he was from Yugoslavia, okay, or former Yugoslavia. In 293, split the empire, east and west. That's a big one. He splits the empire, east and west. Diocletian is going to be in charge of the east. Maximus will be in charge of the west. Okay. Again, saw himself as semi-divine and high priest. Okay. And again, he was absolutely brutal to the Christians, to the early Christians, to eradicate the Christian faith. Okay. So Diocletian, remember, this is a very important emperor in what he did by splitting the empire. If we take a look at the empire now, under Diocletian, in 293, Byzantium is here. This would later be named Constantinople and is now modern-day Istanbul in Turkey. And here's Rome. So here the two empires split now. This is very important in 293.
Sir, where's Yugoslavia?
Yugoslavia is like near Croatia, like in that area, like in that area there. Yeah. It was a former Yugoslavia in during the Cold War. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So yeah, and Yugoslavia would be part of the East. So that's his background is in Eastern Europe, right? So here now we have division, and that brings us Mr. Constantine again. Okay, I don't think we really need to read this again, but again, we understand what happened at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, right? Seeing the cross, seeing a halo. Fights for Rome, wins. Christianity now becomes the state religion under Constantine. Baptized in 337 before his death. Now, what did he pass? Remember the Edict of Milan, which legalizes Christianity. And Nicaea, which is the first conference of bishops. So we know how important Mr. Constantine was. And here's Constantine the Great, proclaimed Augustus in 306, a colossal marble statue in Rome. Huge. This thing is huge.
Oh, sure.
Well, no, we already kind of covered this. So Edict of Milan, we don't need to cover this again. Eventually becomes Saint Constantine. Okay. And you can read now. Yep.
Empire splits. As Western Empire collapsed, 330 CE, Constantine moved the capital to Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. The empire now permanently divided into East and West. Constantinople is rebuilt Byzantine, Nova Roma. By 395 CE, one emperor ruling in Ravenna, West, and the other in Constantinople, East.
Good. Okay, so in 330, again, Constantine moves his capital and he changes the name to Constantinople. Okay, which again, named after himself. So now the empire is permanently divided by 330, East and West. Okay. This is New Roma, Nova Roma, or New Rome. Eventually, the capital will actually, by 395, which we'll see, the capital of Rome actually moves. It moves from Rome to Ravenna. And I'll show you where this is. Okay. Once Rome is sacked, which it's sacked multiple times, it ends up moving to Ravenna, which becomes the new West. And Constantinople will be the East. So here's the official split of East and West. Read, please.
Constantine rebuilt Byzantium as Nova Roma, New Rome, vision of a Christian Roman Empire. The Church of Holy Wisdom converted into a mosque in 453 by the Turks.
Yes, remember the Eastern Roman Empire, which is Byzantium or Nova Roma, New Rome, really lasts for another 1,000 years, right? After the fall of Rome, 1453, which it is taken over by the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Turks. This is an important date, 1453. Yeah. So the Holy Church.
So like before the Turks, the Romans lived there?
Well, it was East Byzantium. Yep, it was part of the still what we call not officially the Roman Empire, but yeah, by the Byzantine Empire. Yep. Until this date. Which is very important in history because remember, 1453, the Ottomans take Constantinople So where is it here on our map? Right here. So now in 1453, this here is taken over by the Ottomans. There's no more link between Europe and Asia. It's cut off. Trade is cut off. So where do the Europeans look? They go west. They start to explore and they start to go and head to the Americas. So this is the beginning now in 1453 of when the European explorers start to, again, the age of exploration, going to the Americas and so on, right? And it's because in 1453, Constantinople is sacked and it's taken over by the Ottomans. So that's why it's such an important date, right? Here's the baptism of Constantine. Okay, we're almost done. And now Theodosius the Great. Sarah, would you like to continue, please? Sarah. Thank you, Dina.
Theodosius the Great. After Constantine's death, 40 years of struggle, Theodosius ruled the restraint and wisdom, had to deal with barbarian menace, employed Visigoths as mercenary soldiers, big mistake, banned all pagan religions in 391 CE, abolished Olympic Games in 394 CE. Why? It represented pagan gods. Died in 395. Sons took over his reign, Arcadius and Honorius.
Okay, thank you so much. So again, Theodosius, again, he's very big when we talk about expanding Christianity, right? Again, his hatred for paganism, he bans it in 391. And again, this is the famous, in 394, he abolishes the Olympic Games, right? We learned that, and now we know why, right? It represented the Roman pagan gods or the Greek pagan gods, and we just cannot have that in our Christian world. Again, he's in charge at this time. By this time in the 4th century here, I mean, Rome is just being attacked on all sides. I mean, it's just a barbarian invasion everywhere you looked. The Visigoths, okay, were one of those barbarians, and one of his mistakes is he does employ them into the army, okay, and we're going to see why that was such a big mistake later on. So this is some important stuff right here in bold. Okay, and the end of the empire. So now this is where we're going to start with the end of the empire and take a look at Rome and where it's being attacked. You have the Angles, the Saxons, the Franks, the Vandals, the Goths, the Huns. Okay, let's read about this. Let's read about these barbarians, these invaders. Okay, so that's it for the Emperor's PowerPoint. Now we're going to move to my PowerPoint right here, the fall of Rome. Sarah, would you like to continue?
Sure.
What stands out for you, Sarah, looking at this picture here? What do you know?
There was probably a lot of use of boats because a lot of it is traveling throughout the water and around the edge of the countries.
Okay, yep. Certainly the Vandals would have. Yep. Coming from Carthage, there in North Africa, modern day Tunisia. What else do you notice though coming from the northeast, coming from the north? What do you notice?
Um,
Who's coming in green? Who's coming from the east in green?
The Huns.
The Huns, yes. Attila the Hun is coming. Okay, so let's see what happens. Sarah.
The barbarians of the ancient world. Mongolian Huns pushed westward, inspired terror. Huns swallowed up other Goths. Ostrogoths, East Goths, Visigoths, West Goths, north of Rhine. Barbarians, those who spoke neither Latin or Greek.
Okay,
Battle.
hold on. Yeah, hold on. Sorry. Hi, Tommy. Welcome. Yes, you're late. Okay, so here's some notes. So the Mongols or Huns came from the east. The Ostrogoths are Eastern Goths. The Visigoths are Western Goths, okay, north of the Rhine, so Germany. And remember, the Romans said anybody who was a barbarian was people who did not speak neither Latin nor Greek were considered barbaric to the Romans or to the Roman Empire. Okay. Continue, please.
Battle of Adrianople, 364 to 378 CE. Location, Roman territory of Thrace, north of Turkey. Romans are defeated under Emperor Valens. Roman army destroyed. Visigoths burst into the empire. Fall came quickly. 500,000 Romans versus 40,000 barbarians. Roman loyalty not as strong. Christianity weakened. Discipline of military. Visigoths now settled in the empire and governed themselves.
Good. So this is a major battle here. Think of just say Battle of Adrian, okay? Battle of Adrian. Battle of Adrianople. Okay, in 364. So this is a huge defeat for the Romans. If you even take a look at these numbers, wow. The barbarians were outnumbered. Okay, only 40,000. But again, a big problem after Christianity is the effect it had on the Roman military, because the Roman loyalty was again not as strong. Christianity weakens the discipline of the military. Okay, the loyalty is no longer to the pagan god Mars or to the emperor who was divine. It is now to Lord Jesus Christ, right? Our Christ. So this has a major impact on the Roman military, and you can see in these numbers. Okay? And what happens after this battle is the Visigoths, the West Goths, now settle in the empire. So you have the German barbarians coming into the empire. Let's get a new reader. Sabrina, been sitting quietly. Sabrina, please.
Visigoths. King Alaric of the Visigoths led army. Visigoths now given a place in the empire. Alaric felt Romans cheated them of land and money. Visigoths then sieges and later sacked Rome in 410. Visigoths also moved through Spain and Portugal, finally settled in France by 418. Did not seek to displace Rome, but work in accordance with Rome. Damage to Rome had been done. The lamp of the whole world has been extinguished, and it is the whole world which has perished in the ruins of this one city.
What a beautiful quote, eh? What a beautiful quote. I'm gonna write that here. So the Visigoths did not seek to displace Rome, but work in accordance with Rome. Okay, but but by the 5th century, I mean the damage has absolutely been done. 410 is the famous sacking of Rome. The Visigoths will eventually settle in France, but they do make their way through Spain and Portugal. And here's the kingdom of the Visigoths. You can see here: Portugal, Spain, France, led by Alaric. Let's watch it. Let's watch Alaric and see who he was.
Today, you crowned me king. Well, I demand a kingdom. From today, we cease to do Rome's bidding. From today, we go to war with Rome.
Alaric's sack of Rome could be likened to the end of the war for the Roman psyche. The fact that Rome, the eternal city, the greatest city in the history of planet Earth to this point, has been sacked at will by the barbarians is a shock from which Roman civilization will never recover.
The sack of Rome in 410 must have been a clarion call for all people that Rome was vulnerable, but it was also a clarion call to barbarians that this could be done.
We know very little about Alaric's rise to power. Somehow he proved himself as a military commander of exceptional talents.
He is a barbarian, but raised in the Roman context, to think like a Roman, to fight like a Roman, and ultimately even leading parts of the Roman army.
The Romans had given him the most intimate education in how the armies work, in how the empire works, and therefore how to destroy it.
Alaric has been betrayed and disappointed time and time and time again. He wanted his homeland. The Romans constantly took it away from him.
Remember that the Goths were inside of Roman territory. They were operating theoretically on Rome's behalf, but Rome hadn't given them territory to settle on and produce their own agricultural goods and so forth. So Alaric needed to become a commander and take his troops into battle in order to continue to get money and supplies from the Romans.
What he really wanted to do was find some measure of independence, some place where he could actually keep his people to himself without having to serve under the eagle.
And this is what Alaric effectively does by being elected king.
Kings had always existed outside the Roman Empire. By making himself a king instead of a general, Alaric was effectively saying that he was not going to be a subject of the Roman Empire anymore.
Alaric is so livid about the betrayals that he's undergone that he lays siege to Rome, and it's a siege that lasts for 18 months.
By surrounding Rome, by attacking Rome, he holds the empire to ransom.
The siege has been going on for too long. It appears that he's never going to take the city.
In order to end the siege, Alaric proposes that he will walk away from the city. He enters into unilateral negotiations with Rome, and he makes them a peace offering of slaves.
What Alaric has given them is effectively a Trojan horse. These slaves are not any old slaves. They're actually 300 of his finest warriors. The slaves have completely infiltrated the city. They go on the rampage, they kill, they slaughter, and they open the gates to the waiting Goths who are outside.
On some level, Alaric had gotten exactly what he wanted. He had wanted to besiege Rome. He had wanted to take Rome. But what did he really want? He really wanted a place for his people to settle. He wanted them to have a place to stay.
So the long-term outcome of the sack of Rome is the acceptance by the empire of the Goths as permanent interlopers within its borders.
Alaric didn't enjoy his success for very long. He died very shortly after the siege of Rome. His people were briefly at a loss. Eventually, though, his successor saw his followers to a permanent settlement in what's now the south of France. After almost 40 years, and with very few of the same people obviously alive, the Goths found a permanent settlement and found a place where a permanent Gothic kingdom could arise.
That's the story of the Visigoths under Alaric. Okay. Where are we? Okay. So again, finally settle in France. Sack of Rome in 410. Okay. And next are the Huns. Let's learn about the Huns. Please, Sabrina, continue. In Central Asia, the Huns.
Huns, Central Asia, continued invasions under Attila the Hun, leader. Invasion added to the already crumbling empire in 451 CE. First advanced into Rome under Attila. Invaded with cruelty and mass destruction. In 453, sack of Rome. Attila dies in his sleep.
There is the famous picture of the sack of Rome in 453. And here's Attila. Okay. Done in this Attila with goat horns, 16th century. Attila the Hun. Take a look by 476. Take a look at the different groups. Ostrogoths, Visigoths, Huns, and where they would settle in the north. Here's Adrianople, that famous battle that was lost in Thrace, which really opened the doors for the barbarians. And now major events. So major events to remember. This is very important, guys. Sabrina, nice and loud.
Fall of Rome, major events. Sack of Rome by Alaric, king of the Visigoths, 410 CE. Attila the Hun, invasion of Italy in 453 CE. Vandals sack Rome in 455 CE, called the Vandalism. September 4th, 476 CE. Romulus Augustus, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, deposed by Odovacar, Germanic heritage. Odovacar was a successful general in the Roman army and becomes the king. Odovacar informed Eastern Emperor in Constantinople that there would be no Western Emperor. Eastern Roman Empire continued until 1453 CE as the Byzantine Empire.
So, Odovacar is the last, the German or of German heritage to take over the Western Empire, and he informs the East, the emperor in Constantinople, that there will no longer be a Western Empire. And the term vandalism comes from the Vandals sacking Rome in 455 and the destruction that was left behind. That's hence the term vandalism. So look at these important dates: 410, 453, 455, all sacking of Rome. And by September 4, 476, the name, right? A name we've heard before, Romulus Augustus, the last emperor of the Western Empire, deposed by Odovacar. Wow, lots happening here. Now, again, the Eastern Roman Empire in the Byzantine Empire will last for another 1,000 years, right? Here's another look of East versus West. Oh, yeah, and I spoke earlier about in the 4th century, because, again, there's such a threat to Rome that when Rome is finally taken in 476, the capital is actually Ravenna, which is up here in the north. Ravenna is here. And then actually for a while becomes the new Rome, the Roman capital, Ravenna up here. Here's Constantinople, modern day Istanbul. Okay. So who are these peoples in Europe? This new settlement in Europe. Who are they? Okay. Sabrina, you're reading, you can continue.
At first, most invading tribes were Germanic. Angles and Saxons overran Britain in 450 CE. Franks invaded Gaul in 450 CE. Vandals joined with Alans, or Persians, and reached North Africa in 429 CE. Visigoths settle in France and Spain by 418 CE. Huns in Asia take Rome in 453 CE. Arabs, aroused by new faith of Islam, conquered Syria, Mesopotamia, Persia, Egypt in 640, North Africa in 700, and Spain in 711. Gave rise to 3 new worlds: the Byzantine world, the Arabic world, and the West.
Good. So all of this, again, this is so important now, right? With these new lands being conquered, new people moving in and settling. So this gives rise to 3 new worlds after the fall of Rome. Okay. You have the Byzantine world, which, like I said, lasts for another 1,000 years. You have the Arabic world, right? One example is the Ottoman Empire, right? And you have the West. Okay, in Western Europe. So these are the 3 worlds that we see that will come about in the Mediterranean world, right? The Byzantine, the Arabic under Islam, and the West. Okay, and again, Angle, you heard the term in Britain, Anglo-Saxons, right? Anglo-Saxons. So they go to Britain in 450. Anglo-Saxons, the Franks in Gaul, Vandals who join with the Alans, ethnically Persian, reach North Africa at this time. Visigoths settle in France and Spain, Huns, and Arabs. Okay. So the new faith of Islam will soon conquer Syria, Mesopotamia, Persia, Egypt, in 640, North Africa 700, and Spain 711. So if we take a look at how quick the Islam was able to spread in the Mediterranean world, it's amazing how quick that it spread. Okay. And we will get to that hopefully next week. So these are the 3 new worlds which emerge after Rome. And we're going to get to the Byzantine Empire as well, and the reign of Justinian in 6th century. Justinian. So let's just watch this here, just to kind of go over what I've been talking about for the last half an hour, okay? This is really good, so I want everybody to pay attention. Very important.
In the last video, we talk about the first 200 years of Rome being an official empire, starting with Augustus in 27 BCE, going all the way to Marcus Aurelius. And that time period is referred to as Pax Romana, Roman peace. It's a relatively stable, relatively peaceful time for Rome. Now, all of that is relative. If you're one of the tribes that are still fighting with the Roman legions, if you're one of the roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of the population that is a slave, you might not view this as such a good time. But things only get worse after the death of Marcus Aurelius, who's viewed as the last of the 5 good emperors, so to speak. His son Commodus takes over, and Commodus is the beginning of a succession of emperors who are less and less competent, who are, the empire becomes more and more corrupt. less and less stable, and things really come to a head and start to decelerate even further, or I guess accelerate downward even further, in 235 CE, when the Emperor Severus Alexander is assassinated. And this throws the empire into a 50-year crisis called the Third Century Crisis, because it happened in the 3rd century. And over this 50 years, there's 26 claimants to emperor. The empire is temporarily split into 3 different states. There's attacks from the east, from the Sassanids, the Sasanian Empire. They're the successors to the Parthians. You have attacks across the Rhine and the Danube from Germanic tribes. All of that makes this a very unstable period for Rome. Now, the 3rd century crisis is considered to end in 284 with the ascension of Diocletian. And Diocletian is viewed as a somewhat or a reasonably strong emperor. He's known as the last emperor that really persecuted the Christians because they didn't follow the Roman religion. They did not worship the emperor as a god. But he's also, or maybe he's most famous for, splitting the empire. He decides that probably one of the main causes of the 3rd century crisis is that the empire has gotten too vast. It has too many borders. It's hard for one emperor to administer the whole thing. So he splits it into east and west from an administrative point of view. They don't become separate empires, but he decides that he is going to rule from the east and that he will have a co-emperor who rules from the west. And not only does he set that up, but he sets up what's called a tetrarchy. Beyond himself and his co-emperor, they each have a second in command that if any one of them were to die or would have to retire somehow, that second in command could take over. And once again, this is to address some of the issues of the 3rd century crisis, where the wars for succession, and this isn't just during the 3rd century crisis, we've seen in multiple videos, Rome is famous, even during the Pax Romana, for these really ugly succession battles. But as we'll see, the splitting of the empire into east and west, even though it started as an administrative thing, over time it's going to become a real split, and they're going to turn into 2 different empires. Now, after Diocletian, you have another significant emperor. You have Constantine. And Constantine is known for many things. Maybe most famously, he embraced Christianity as opposed to Diocletian, who persecuted Christians. You have the Council of Nicaea and the Nicene Code, where there's now a uniform church doctrine around Christianity. He has the Edict of Milan, which makes Christianity illegal under Roman rule. Maybe most famously, on his deathbed, he gets baptized. He becomes the first Christian emperor. He also officially moves the capital of the entire empire to what at the time was Byzantium, but then he renames it to Constantinople, named after him. Now, it was still one unified empire. Even Diocletian, who co-ruled with a co-emperor, he had veto power over the emperor to the west. Now, as we get further into the 4th century here, and especially into the 5th century, we'll see that the empire further and further fragments and gets diluted and really just breaks down. One major factor in that breakdown is in that 4th century, in the 4th and 5th centuries, you have a group called the Huns coming in from Central Asia, coming in from Northern Europe right over here. And they are fierce, nomadic conquerors. And they're so fierce that they start pushing more of the Germanic tribes across the Rhine and the Danube. And a lot of these Germanic tribes, at first, even though their history has been fighting the Romans, a lot of them try to seek refuge in the Roman Empire, and they're given refuge in the Roman Empire. But while they have that refuge, they're treated very, very, very badly. And all of that comes to a head in the last quarter of the 4th century with the Gothic Wars. And the Gothic Wars really have a decisive battle at Adrianople. Originally Hadrianopolis, named after the Emperor Hadrian. And at Adrianople, the Gothic tribes in particular, and when we say Gothic, we're really talking about Germanic tribes. And this one in particular, as you can see from this legend right over here, this is the Visigoths or Western Goths. They're able to decisively defeat the Eastern Roman Emperor Valens. He's actually killed at Adrianople. And then the Visigoths just continue to hang out here in the Roman Empire, and they continue to move forward. In 410, they're able to actually sack Rome, and they eventually settle in the Iberian Peninsula and in southern Gaul. Now, after the Battle of Adrianople, you have another significant emperor, Theodosius, because what you'll see is that Diocletian persecuted Christians. Constantine now embraces Christianity. He becomes a Christian. He says Christianity is legal. Theodosius now, right as we are about to enter into the 5th century, he makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. So in roughly 100 years, the Roman Empire went from persecuting Christians to making it the official religion, and actually going the other way, starting to persecute some of the pre-Christian religions or rituals. The other thing that happens as we enter into the 5th century now, as we go into the 5th century, you have the capital of the Western Empire is moved from Rome to Ravenna, with the idea that the emperors see all of these Germanic tribes, they feel threatened by them, that Ravenna is easier to defend. It's surrounded by kind of marshy, swampy area. The other thing of note about Theodosius, and as we move into this really the last century of the Western Roman Empire, is Theodosius was the last Roman emperor to rule all of Rome. After that, the East and West are going to be ruled essentially independently. They're essentially going to be separate empires. But then as we get into the 5th century, we already talked about the Visigoths sacking Rome. Then in 455, you have the Vandals, which is another Germanic tribe that was similarly originally pushed out by the Huns. You see them in blue right over here. They make it down the Iberian Peninsula into North Africa. They eventually get to Carthage, and they become a little bit of a naval power, and they eventually are able to, in 455, sack Rome as well. So Rome is really taking a hit multiple times. And then finally, the end of the Roman Empire, or the Western Roman Empire, that most historians consider the end of the Roman Empire, is when the Germanic ruler, general Odoacer, or Odoacer, depending on how you pronounce it, is able to oust the emperor in Ravenna. And so then you have the official, and just to be clear, this is Roman Empire. And so Odoacer is able to essentially end the Western Empire as we know it. And after that, the Western Empire becomes more and more fragmented into these kingdoms that are ruled by essentially Germanic kings, and that we are now entering into the Middle Ages. Now, the big question that historians have a lot of fun thinking about is, why did all of this happen? Why did the Roman Empire fall? And before we even talk about why it fell, we should give them a little bit of credit. Even in this video where I talk about the fall of the Roman Empire, I'm covering 300 years of history. And if you start with the founding of the Republic until Odoacer takes over Ravenna, ousts the emperor, we're talking 1,000 years. Most civilizations, most empires don't last anywhere near that long. So to some degree, it's surprising that it lasted so long. But in terms of the causes of its decline, we've talked about several of them in this video. The empire got divided. The East and West stopped viewing themselves so much as the same empire. Trade sometimes broke down. They didn't support each other militarily. The Eastern Empire was generally stronger, so it allowed invading tribes to focus on the weak point in the West. Some historians would say that the Roman Empire stopped expanding, and it needed that expansion in order to keep getting more land and more slaves that really drove its economy. One major factor probably was the Huns that caused this great migration in the 4th and 5th centuries. It caused the Germanic tribes to cross the Rhine and cross the Danube and become either settle as part of the Roman Empire or threaten the Roman Empire. Another theory, and all of these are probably contributors, is that as the Germanic tribes settled, they actually became more and more part of the Roman military. And some of them were officially part of the military. Some of them were mercenaries, soldiers for fortune, paid soldiers. And so you can imagine their allegiance to Rome was not as strong. Some folks say Christianity may have been a factor, that the empire might have lasted, especially when people were doing what their traditional rites, rituals, they worshipped an emperor, but now Christianity wasn't about worshiping an emperor anymore. A lot of people think it's corruption, instability, and we've talked a little bit about that. It could have been invasions, not just from the Germanic tribes and the Huns, but also the Sassanids on the east. So I'll leave you there. And to think about what was the cause, or maybe what allowed the Roman Empire to survive for so long.
All right. Great video there. Great video. So something I want you to think about is this question right here, which will be a final question. You're going to see it again. Trust me, you're going to see this question again. Historians have debated this issue for centuries. What caused the decline and fall of the Roman Empire? What factors do you think played the most significant role in the empire's decline? Why? So what caused the decline and fall of the empire? What factors do you think played the most significant role in the decline of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire? Because remember, the Eastern Roman Empire continues for another 1,000 years or so. So that's the final question there. So that's a question you should be thinking about, because you're going to see this again. What I would like you all to do now, so I've attached, this is the PowerPoint that we just went through. So I suggest you take a look at this again, okay? It's really in detail, okay, of what we learned. And in wrapping up the legacy of Rome, I mean, when we think about Rome, there's a lot that should come to mind, right? When we think of the legacy of Rome. So we covered so much, right, in such a short period of time. But in short here, the legacy of Rome that you need to remember is one, the Republic, right? We started with the Republic and government and the bureaucracy of Rome and the Senate. Roman law, Latin, the language of Latin from Latium, the Roman Catholic Church, city planning, okay, Roman architectural style, architecture, and literature. I should have put literature here as well. And of course, Roman engineering, right? Concrete or cement, sewage systems, and aqueducts. So the legacy of Rome. It could all be found in this PowerPoint under the fall of Rome. I also have just a short one page of notes here. Just a quick why did Rome fall? Or maybe review that. And then I have a reading for you, which you're going to do now. Everybody's going to take maybe 20 minutes to a half an hour to read this. Decline and Fall of Rome. So this is what's called perspective, okay? There's 3 viewpoints, okay? It's called perspectives on the past, and I have 3 viewpoints. One is politics, defense, and economics, right? So politics, economics, defense, military. Okay. So this is what you're going to read. And again, this is going to go to that final question. What was the major cause of the fall of Rome? Was it political? Was it economics? Was it defense? Military? Okay. Or could it have been another one? Could it have been rise of Christianity? Okay. So this one right here, I would like you to read the 3 perspectives or viewpoints on the fall of Rome. And then I will let you know what you have to do after. Okay? So right now you are just reading the 3 viewpoints and you are reviewing the PowerPoint. Okay? Maybe taking some notes on what you learned today. Okay? And I'll let you know what you have to do. But that's what you're doing for me right now. You are reading and taking notes. Okay, get to work.